Hey guys, it's Rev from Into Gaming. This is going to be the PUBG Loot Spawning System Part 3 video covering loot tables. Um, so basically, let's just jump into it. What is a loot table? The loot table is the map's inventory list. Pretty much what it has in stock to be able to spawn into the game world for you to pick up. It's the total count stock, and each item is pretty much itemized for a certain amount of availability. And I'll show you what I have set up for this little demo setup. Um, this is it. It's 24 items. That's all the items that I have set up for this demo. And each one of them has a certain availability. So Berettas has a max spawn count of 5 for this map. Colt 45s is 5. Mossberg 500s is 5. Once those numbers are exceeded for the particular item, no more of them will be spawned. And the way that I have mine set up in a way to give you a higher AR count. So G36s 20, M4A1s 20, AK-74s used 20, AK-47s 20, and the Galil is 20. So there's a high count of heavy weapons versus the SMG, shotgun, and pistols. I mean, they vastly outweigh them. So, in this demo, if I was to spawn every item in it, we'd have a very high density of higher tier weapons. And loot tables give you that ability to adjust that off. One thing that you'll also notice at the bottom of that list, the ammo is really high comparative to the the actual weapons and stuff that it would go to. And technically, I have two guns here that are going to run, and that's 60 packs. The Bison I have, Bison and the M9 are the only ones that use 9mm, and that's a high count. 12 gauge, that's definitely a high count. I wouldn't need that much 12 gauge ammo, or yeah, for the shotgun. I would probably need half that. So you can adjust these numbers off to be appropriate. But every time a weapon is spawned, 1 to 3 packs of ammo are spawned for that item dynamically, and those numbers are deducted from the loot table as well. Plus, you have ammo that spawns in the wild that's set up and configured into your loot spawners. So, I mean, these numbers have a purpose, and the total, if you were to take the right column and total it up, it can't exceed a certain number. PUBG had a dev letter out that was talking about the Erangel loot system, and they were going to tweak things, and they increased spawn rates of ARs and so forth, and they got rid of pistol attachments and so forth that actually freed up availability, dynamic actor availability, so that they could buff numbers in other things. So say we had a row in here in this loot table for extended mags for pistols. I don't need those anymore. I'm going to take them out, and we're just going to allow the SMG stuff to work, so I can get rid of that and say that count was 50 for the world to spawn. I can take that 50 count and now distribute it between my ARs. I can bump G36s up to 30. Actually, pretty much all the ARs I could bump up 10. So that just increased the AR count. And I can do the same thing with the suppressor that was for the pistols. Those are no longer in the game. So we're going to now make the SMG stuff universal for pistols, so I can take all the suppressor counts that we had in the loot table and distribute them through ARs. And we can tweak some other numbers and everything to boost things, but the bottom line is you can't exceed a certain number of items spawned in the world, and you want to be able to control the density of different items in comparison. So lower counts of SMGs will lower those numbers and will increase the ARs in balance. We don't want so many frag grenades, so we'll take away from frag grenades and add it to smoke and flash grenades and Molotovs. We don't want so many high power optics, so we'll reduce those and increase the lower tiered optics a little bit more, and so forth. And the same with gear and everything else. Not so many level 1s, more level 2s, and so on and so forth. So it's twofold for the loot table. Control, a little bit more control over what can spawn in the world. It affects RNG to a degree, and controlling map performance, which is your dynamic actor limit, which we're gonna jump into right now, because I'm gonna have to explain what is a dynamic actor versus a static actor. A dynamic actor in a game is any asset that's in the game world that a player or any other actor can interact with and change its state. So if I break a window, I just changed its state. It's broken and no longer there. It's dynamic. I have to tell the rest of the players around the map that it's changed. So there's certain information that I have to store in a certain information table, a data table, and then replicate that data out. The same with doors. Doors are dynamic. They're opened or they're closed. You have those two states, or a single state, open, close. You can do it with a boolean. And it also has a damaged state. It can be damaged, and depending on where it gets shot and destroyed, there's going to be a chunk missing, and that chunk needs to be represented for everybody. So if I blow a hole in the door dead center, well, everybody that comes by and looks at that door needs to see the same damage in the same hole. So that's dynamic information. Loot items in themselves are dynamic because they have a location, a rotation, a scale, a skin, by default when they're dropped into the world. They can be picked up, removed from the world, and added to a player inventory. They can be dropped back into the world and modified. The pickup version can be modified. So you have the original spawn state of what it was and where it was and all that information, versus me picking it up, adding a whole bunch of attachments to it and a different skin, and then tossing it back out in the world. That information has to be stored and updated. So the more of these things that you store on the server, in the server's memory, the more resources needed. And there's a cap. I don't have enough memory to do more than 25,000 and enough CPU to process that information quick enough. So I have to lower my count. And technically this is why you will never see any more than the current loot counts on Erangel or any other map for that matter, especially large maps. So we'll never see the Sandhawk density or Vikendi density on the larger maps, Erangel and Miramar. It's just not possible without increasing the server's resources, which increases the server's monthly cost per instance. So every server that you boost up in resources, it costs more, and it costs more per instance, so to speak, which pulls more money away from life expectancy of the game. So you have to look at all those little different things. So I'm hoping that this kind of covers the loot tables and how they all work and whatnot, the points of them. I could do some little examples here, which I didn't really, I don't think I covered this in the second video with the building of the item, the build list. I think let me take a look at some basic notes. Yeah, build the list from the spunk, big loop through, yada yada yada. One of the things that happens in the build process, so when we configure the spawner, we get all these items that it can spawn. So like this is one of my presets for the weapons, and it's just preset with an M9 Colt 45 and a Mossberg. So when we build that list in before we start spawning things for this trigger. Um, One of the processes that happens is we go through that list and we do counts. So right now when this goes through, when I trip it, one of the first things that happens in the build function is it gets the length of this array. It says, okay, well, what's the weapons list length? The length is how many items or elements are in its array. And right now it would spit out 3 for this 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So I take all those links and I add them all together, and then I just do a simple check. Hey, is this added up number greater than 0? If so, proceed with building the list. And we loop through each one of these little arrays and we do specialized checks. And the basic check here is, can I find it in, is there a class for the item that we're going to spawn, which is going to be represented by the static mesh that's popped into the world that you can see and interact with. Is there a class for it, and does it exist? Yes. Okay, well, let's move to the next check. And the next check is check the loot table. Does this exist in the loot table? So technically, I could throw a QBZ into the items and not have it in the loot table. If it's not in the loot table, I don't want that QBZ to be considered for spawning, period. So if it's not in the loot table, it's not added to the actual full-on loot list, the one that's going to be used for the spawning aspect of things, RNG. If the item is in the list and its count is greater than 0, yeah, we're going to use it. Otherwise, we don't add it. So we have these little checks, and actually, let me just go in here and show it to you real quick. So here's the basics of it real quick. This is a very simplified process, so it's very efficient. So we're getting the spawner here, and then we're going up and saying, okay, well, what's the weapons list length, the attachments length, and so forth. Didn't really want to get into the code aspect of it because it's just too much for some people, but I'm going to take a minute to show this. We go up and we check this count. We add everything together, and if this value, the returned value, is greater than 0, which is true, we move on to actually building the loot list. Otherwise, we get that little loot list is empty thing, and we punch out a return which has a boolean of proceed is false. This actually tells the next function in the line in the sequence of events that no, something failed in here, we're not spawning anything, eject out of this. And you can just destroy this actor and move along to the next thing in the thread. But as far as building it out, we go back, we get the length again, make sure that it's greater than 0, so we're not looping for no reason. So if the weapon list has something in it, it's going to be greater than 0. Boom, we start looping, and this is the loop. How many times are we going to loop through it? One time for each item in that weapons list array. And then we go into the basic checks. Is the thing in the loot item class? And we pass off a name, say, hey, we're looking for this item, find it. If it's available in this list, true. We're going to do one more check on this. Is it in the loot map? Find it in the loot map. This returns a Boolean value. If it's true and its value, its availability is greater than 0, boom, we're going to add it to the list. And we just iterate through for each one of those classes. Not the most efficient way, but it is the most efficient way for the control set that I've put into this thing versus adding 10 zillion more actors, spawn actors to the map. We're compiling all the classes into one array kind of set up here versus having to increase the actor density out on the map itself. So instead of having, like, for each one of these, I would have, similar to my little preset things down here, instead of having a weapons list spawner, an attachments list spawner, ammo list, each one of these, and having to drag, all those things all over the place, and just adding more of these spawners into the world, we're condensing the dynamic actors that we're putting into the world and compiling all the lists into one thing. So if I wanted to, spawn multiple things here in this thing, I could set it up to spawn multiple things, and it would randomly pick through them. So we're reducing the number of these actors in the world, which gives us more room to play with actually adding more items into the world. So there's a lot of give and take with how you code these things, and the amount of control. I'm adding more control, which reduces the number of actors that I have to drag and drop into the world, which affects the loot count total, versus doing a different way and having to increase all that. So there's a whole lot of give and take there. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, think we kind of covered everything with this. I'm hoping. Maybe I'm forgetting something here. Actually, I'll show you this in practice here. Let me take this. Let me take this one, and we're gonna. What am I doing? So we emptied out this one. This one's emptied, and this is just all weapons. So let me see what that was again. Brennan M9 it was the low tier stuff. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set those right there to 0, and then we're gonna play this, and what we're going to get. Let this stuff scroll off the screen. All right, I'm gonna come over and hit this one. Loot list is empty because it didn't have anything configured. Let me go hit this one. We're gonna get a red message on this one. Loot list exhausted. That means that every item that was available in that list to actually spawn, that was a legitimate item, didn't have any count, or it wasn't in the loot table. So it was just out of stock. Boom, and it spawned nothing. So that's the practicality of that system at play. Do a little bit of a check to stop you from doing a bunch of other crazy stuff, and you're increasing your efficiency across the board. Versus me, instead of that one math checking the lengths of everything, I just jumped into this wild thing and did all these for each loops when it was pointless. There's nothing in it. So that is an efficiency thing and a performance thing. Hope that clears up things. I think the only thing I have left to address is the dev letters. 25,000 set up. Yeah, I think that's it. I mentioned the dev letter, and it said that they had a 25,000 actor limit, a little bit over that. Devs did not clarify in was if it, actually included vehicles, projectiles, so there's, and the number of spawn actors that we have in the world, or all, if it included all other. So I'm not positive on that aspect of things because they didn't stipulate that information. So what we could be looking at total here is 25,000, actors, includes all the glass, the doors, the destructibles, the vehicles, the projectiles, the number of spawn actors into the world, or all these little guys, counting, and we didn't even go through the whole building. This one building, it's pretty decent. Expect at least one in each one of these rooms. So it doesn't count any of that stuff. If that's the case, if 25,000 to cover everything, you're not looking at numbers. You're not looking at 24 or 25,000 loot items being spawned. Um, they would be whatever's remaining after you counted all the glass, the door, vehicles, projectiles, and stuff into the world. And you have to cushion for projectiles, you have to cushion for ammo, because ammo is dynamically spawned for each item. So if we technically run out of 5.56 in the actual loot table, it's no longer available, it's zeroed out. We've extra spawners going through that spawns a weapon with a 5.56 that uses 5.56. It's PS2. You can't spawn a weapon without spawning ammo. So we gotta, deal with that. But any actor that specifically says spawn 5.56 in it is not gonna spawn 5.56 anymore. So there's those things. So I'm not really sure on that number. 25,000 does seem like quite a bit above, because there's a lot of glass and doors that are out there. Not too many destructibles, not too many vehicles, but there's definitely a lot of glass and doors on these vehicles. Um, Thousands. If you counted them all up, there'd be thousands of them. Um, so, anyway, I think that covers it. I'm hoping so. This is over 20-minute video on loot tables. But if there's any other questions on loot tables or any aspect of the series, you want more detail on anything, as always, just ask. If you set up or something, no problem. When I get time to do it, I'll do it. But I'll definitely respond to questions in at least a post. Have a good one.